Hello everyone, welcome to our second video on the Language of Anatomy series. So the second video is going to be on the body, planes, and sections. During this video, we'll talk about what an anatomical plane is, we'll talk about what an anatomical section is, and then we'll talk about the three types of planes: the transverse plane, the frontal plane, and the sagittal plane. So a plane and planes and sections are actually very simple. A plane, if you remember from geometry, is just kind of like an imaginary board, which you can sort of see. Which you can sort of see in the image here. Okay. So we've got sort of two planes here, a horizontal one and a vertical one. You would notice that they're kind of like imaginary boards. Okay. Now, we can take these imaginary boards, these planes, and we can sort of, pass them through the human body. When you use these planes, planes are what you would use when you describe a section. So a section is a cut through the body through a particular plane. So you can sort of see a section here, a cut through the body. Notice that, you could sort of have an imaginary board here, kind of like this. Okay, and so that slice there would be right through that plane. So that's what we call a section. So there are three types of body planes and sections: the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, and the transverse plane. A sagittal plane is going to be a plane that separates left and right, left side from the right side. So you can see two sagittal planes here. Okay, you can see the red one here, and you can see a yellow one here. So notice that the red one here passes right through the middle of the body, right down the center. This is what we call a mid-sagittal plane. Okay? A mid-sagittal plane. Right down the center of the body. Sometimes people will just refer to this as midline. The yellow one here, notice, is parallel to that mid-sagittal plane. Since this is still a sagittal plane, but it's not right there on midline, it's parallel to midline, this is what we call a parasagittal plane, for parallel. So basically that would be any plane that would be parallel to this mid-sagittal plane. So if you made a cut immediately to the left or to the right of the mid-sagittal plane, that would be a parasagittal plane as well. Sagittal sections of the human body are actually fairly common in imaging, particularly in CAT scan images, which you can see in the picture here. So this would be a mid-sagittal section of the human brain, or of the human head, and this would be like in a mid-sagittal plane, right down the middle of the body, and it allows you to see some of the structures of the brain here, and the spinal cord, and a frontal plane can be seen here in blue. So a frontal plane is going to separate front from back. Okay, so you can see that here in the blue plane. You cut through this frontal plane, and it will separate the back of the body from the front of the body. Okay, you can also see sort of an example of a frontal section through the front of the head here, which will separate sort of the front of the head from the back of the head. And you can see that this will give you kind of a different view than your sagittal plane, your sagittal section of the head that we saw just a little in the slide earlier. The final plane is called a transverse plane. So you can see a transverse plane in the picture here in green. A transverse plane is going to be a plane that separates top and bottom. And again, you can have a transverse plane anywhere along the body. So you can have a transverse plane through the head, or through the neck, or through the chest, or through the abdomen like you see here. As long as it separates top and bottom, that's what we would call a transverse plane. So here you have kind of a model that shows you a transverse section through the head. Okay, so kind of right at the level of the eyes. So you got cut the eyes into a top and a bottom section. Cut the brain into a top and bottom section here. So this is kind of a good example of what you would get if you did you had a transverse section through the head at this region. So this concludes our video on planes and sections.